everyone, and welcome to another fantastic edition of Training Honour TV. And today I've got a fantastic guest for you. He's a gentleman who has plenty of experience playing in what is now known as the English Football League with clubs such as Oldham Athletic and Preston North End, before going into a successful period of management over in Ireland with teams such as Athlone Town and Bohemians. And I'm delighted to welcome Aaron Callaghan to the show. Aaron, welcome to the show. How are you?
Okay, Chris, not too bad considering we're still in lockdown over here, but hopefully that will change in a couple of weeks and we can get back out and have a little game of golf, which I'm sadly missing at the moment.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I think it's about March 29th. I think we're open here over in England, but I think you've got it a bit harder in Ireland, unfortunately. But it's
yeah,
I don't know, it swings and roundabouts at the minute. We've got to do what we can do, I guess. But for the listeners, just want to give the guys a brief introduction to sort of how you got into football and a brief rundown of your career as a player, really.
Yeah, back in 1984, if some of your viewers can remember that date, I was a bit of a spring chicken, 16-year-old who was fortunate enough to get a trial from into Stoke City from a club over in Dublin called Lure Celtic. I went over for 2 weeks in the pre-season. I hadn't turned 16. I was only 15 and a half actually at the time. And I'd done 2 weeks on trial with Stoke City. And literally I was getting on the plane to come home after the trial, and I got a phone call. Well, I got a message to go back down to the club. So I had to cancel the flight to go back down to the club. They actually wanted to sign me then and there.
Wow.
But I had to... I couldn't do it because I had to discuss it with my parents, so I had to go back. And I was 16 in the October, and the contract was sent over in post. We didn't have any email at that stage back then, and I come back over in the October, and it signed for a 3-year contract, 1 year as an apprentice and 2 years as a professional. So it was everything changed in my life literally over the course of a couple of weeks. The 2-week trial, I obviously had done well on it. And Stoke was very kind and very good to me at the time. It was a brilliant club. It was a club at that stage that was, I think that year, 84, if I'm not wrong, finished 5th or 6th in the old First Division. And they had players playing at the club with the likes of Mickey Thomas, Alan Hudson, just to name a couple. The old Dave Watson, the old English Dave Watson centre half. I know there was 2 that played for England. Peter Hammond. Mark Chamberlain, who went on to play for England, and the list goes on. It was. I went from watching Match of the Day on a Saturday night to being all of a sudden, talking to these players as an apprentice and cleaning the boots of Dave Watson.
Wow, that's a really, really big eye opener. That, and coming over from Ireland and having the trial to then having the world at your feet. I suppose that's an absolutely fantastic experience, isn't it? Really, and because
it was whirlwind to be.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry. We got playing for the U team fairly quickly, which was a bunch of lads from the UK, 1 or 2 from Scotland. I think there was 1 lad over there from Spain at the club at the time. So we actually forged a very, very good, successful U team, culminating in the fact that we got to the FA Youth Cup final against Everton in '86. So we had a very successful youth team, and a lot of the players that played in that youth team actually, got a debut at first team level within Stoke. I was fortunate enough to play for the first team at 17.
Wow.
And albeit I was playing at centre back, that was my best position. But I made my debut for Stoke City away to Aston Villa. I think it was about 40,000 at the game, and I was playing left back. I remember the winger. 2 wingers that we were marking on that day because they swapped over. One of them was Mark Walters, the ex-Liverpool winger, and the other fella, I don't know if you're old enough to remember him yourself, Chris, was the French winger Didier Cisse.
Oh no, I'm not too familiar with him, to be fair. No, I know all about Mark Walters growing up as a Liverpool fan, but no, I don't remember him, to be fair.
Yeah, so it was a brilliant time for the likes of myself, a young lad coming over from Dublin, to experience something like that. Unfortunately, I couldn't tell my parents because, as I said to you, we didn't have any mobile phones or any emails around at the time. So it was a couple of days later that they found out I'd made my debut. So it was brilliant for me. It was fantastic to play or be given the opportunity to play at the club. And unfortunately, You know, I was there for 5 seasons. It was, you know, I really enjoyed the seasons, but there was a lot of upheaval. Like we had 4 managers in 5 years. Bill Aspie took over after Richie Barker, who was the guy who signed me. Then Bill Aspie took over in a caretaker capacity. Mick Mills came in then, and then after Mick Mills came in, a lot of young lads at the club were surplus to requirements. He wanted to get in a couple of experienced players, and that's how I got me moved to Oldham.
Wow, that's the thing, isn't it, with new managers, and you know, having to play and have. I suppose it. How was it playing for having 4 managers in 5 seasons? Because I guess as a youngster that's as good as been thrown into a first team environment within a very short period, I suppose it's quite unsettling to a degree, isn't it? I mean, how did you cope with that, Aaron, going within the first couple of years early in your career?
Well, you know, what you find is each manager has a different way of playing, different style, tactics. And you know, one minute you're playing, you know, 4-4-2, the next minute you're playing, you know, 4-3-3, and managers change formations and change systems. And you know, some managers that come in rely a lot more on experience. And I felt back then, I particularly felt when Mick came in, you know, the club was in a perilous position. They just got relegated from the first division, of the old first division.
Yeah.
They were in the second division at the time, and he wanted to stabilise the club. And I think the best way he thought to stabilise the club was to get in tried and trusted players, particularly at that level. And you know, that's when a lot of the young players who played in that U Cup, who had done very well for Stoke in that U Cup, were surplus to requirements at that stage. So you know, the change of tactics more so was that you're trying to get used to the different systems, and the different behaviours that the different managers brought in. Like, well, you know, each of them had their own sort of philosophy on how they wanted the game to play, and then you had to sort of buy into that philosophy. Or if you didn't, you know, it was a case of, at that stage, there was a ruthless. It was ruthless back then in relation to, you know, if you weren't wanted around the club, you know, you were told, and you know, you either had to find a different club or you had to just rot away in the reserves.
No, that's the thing. It's all about adapting and overcoming, isn't it? And yeah, I totally agree with, you know, it certainly wasn't what it is today. Now, unfortunately, obviously football's always been a business, but it's more about the business now than it was back then, really, wasn't it? But back in the 80s, 90s, it was all about players going out and actually enjoying the football. Whereas nowadays, it's who can get the most money for the newest Adidas boots and everything, and that, which is, it's scary. But obviously, you then got the move to Oldham, and you know, Oldham were, you know, although they're in League Two at the moment, they were quite a big club back then at Boundary Park. And you know, how did that move come about, and you know, how did you find it down at Boundary Park?
Well, normally when, you know, I went in and had a chat with Mick after one of the games. I think we played it in such a way, and we had a difference of opinion in relation. We lost the game. You know, it was one of the final few games that we were playing in the league, and he had a bit of an argument after the game, and he called me in on the Monday after the game. You know, a typical young, you know, feisty Dublin guy, you know, playing centre half. You know, I didn't have a problem, you know, sharing my opinion in relation to what I felt should be going on. So
not a bad thing.
We had a big difference. We had a big difference of opinion in the changing room, and we both agreed that we'd put my name on the transfer list at the time. And I think you know, it was the old second division, which was one league down from the top flight. Oldham were actually at the top of the league in that division, and Stoke were just below midway, trying to find our way. And I remember Mick saying to me that, look, it could be a long wait on the transfer list. That's what he said to me. And I think within 2 or 3 days, I got a phone call from Joe Royle, and Joe had said to me he'd seen my name on the list, and he remembered me from a tournament the previous summer where Stoke had played in. We went over to play in the tournament, and Oldham were over there as well.
Wow.
And he remembered me from the tournament, and just worried about what the situation was. I said, look, you know, I've got a difference of opinion between myself and Mick, and it looks as if I'm going to move on. So I said, they want a small fee. I didn't think it was that much. I think it was about 40, 50 grand at the time. And so they got talking, the two managers, and within, I say, 4 or 5 days, I was a registered player playing for Oldham. So I'd gone from a team, you know, 5th, 6th from bottom of that division up to a team that was 2nd from top. So it was an amazing move for me, and moved into a group of players, you know, fantastic players. Now, the only regret I ever have, I suppose, with the Oldham gig was the plastic pitch at the time. Oldham would have had the plastic pitch at the time, and I didn't know to this day if it's like, in hindsight, if you look back, you probably wouldn't have made that decision because of pitch, nothing to do with the club. The club was absolutely brilliant. Joe and Willie Donaghy were fantastic people. The fans were superb, and the area, I loved the area as well when I moved up there. But the pitch just took a toll in relation to not just myself, but a lot of the players and the injuries that we've had on the pitch. So it was a difficult time.
Yeah, cool. And to play for a manager of Joe Royle's stature, I guess was a huge thing. But that was just the start, really, of some good things to come. Because of course you then went on and got a call up to the Ireland national team under 21 level. How did I mean, when it comes to playing international football, how does that work? Do they send? Because of course we see the likes. We do see international managers at stands and that on the TV on Sky at the moment. But from a player's perspective, how does that sort of come about in terms of gaining the international recognition? Is it more based on your performances, or is it more? Because some people might think it's to do with who you know as well. How did the call up come about for yourself?
Well, back in Dublin, most of the FAI would have had an Excel spreadsheet on every player that went to the UK and every player that was moving across Ireland. So, I mean, I was lucky enough. I played for Ireland under 15, under 16, under 18, and under 21. So I was in the system already prior to going to the UK, and having played for the under 15s and being very successful for an under 15 team. We came third in the European competition over in Russia, and I think Russia and Hungary ourselves. I'm not too sure the other team at the time. We're the semi-finalists. We got just narrowly beaten by Russia in the shootout, and they went on to win the competition. So we played. We very successful youth side. So a lot of those players would have been, or the Irish setup would have been aware. A lot of the players that were over in the UK are playing locally within the League of Ireland system. So I was on the system. I was in the system from an early age. So the fact that I moved to the UK and I was moving around, would have highlighted the fact that I was, potentially a player that could play, the 18s for the 21s. And I did get a call. I got one senior call up from Jack actually at the time. And it was the Israel that came at home, and I was playing for Stoke at the time. I was only at the breaking into the Stoke team, but unfortunately I was injured for that call up. And after that, I never really got a look in after that. And when you look at the centre halves, the centre backs that were playing for Ireland at the time, Paul McGrath, Dave O'Leary, McCarthy came into that. Kevin Moran, I was never going to break into that quality of squad like so. But the fact that I got one call up, I got recognition from Jack, to be fair, and the fact that it's probably me last in my I never really got a senior cap. But look, that's the way it goes. I mean, some people do and some people don't. Like,
yeah, but you still had a
live in the past.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, you still had a really good career, and going, being able to represent your country at youth level all the way up to 21s is a huge success in itself, really. And that's not the only success you had in your career, Aaron, was it? Really, when you consider what you did with your playing career, and then of course the transition to management as well. And I mean, I guess transitioning from playing to managing, I guess that's a big thing to do, isn't it, really? Especially when you've got a really big camaraderie with the lads in the changing room to then become a player manager. I mean, how did the lads adapt to you, and how did you adapt to the lads in terms
I think because of the fact, my big move, when I started thinking about management, believe it or not, I was about 23, 24. Wow. And it was after I moved to Crewe. So my next move from Oldham went down to Crewe. And I went into an environment with Dario Gradi, and everybody will remember Dario in relation to the fact that the development of players that he did at the club. I know there was other aspects of the club that have been highlighted in the media that haven't been so good in relation to one or two personnel. But from a development perspective, Dario Gradi was one of the best coaches for young players. In my opinion, in Europe at the time. And when I went down to Dario, I started getting very, very interested in the tactical game, and I started getting involved in the academy infrastructure down at Crewe. So in other words, when we finished training, or if there's any coaching to be done, I go out and help Dario with the younger lads, and we became very good friends and we became very close in relation to the fact that we could talk from a tactical point of view. It was about 23, 24. Then I went on and done the advanced A coaching badge in the UK, in Lilleshall. It was at Lilleshall, I think, at the time. Yeah. And so I came back then with that badge, and I went away as a player, and I came back to Crewe at 24 years of age, done the coaching badge as a player coach, and then all of a sudden it clicked for me in relation to that. I wasn't just thinking about myself all the time. It wasn't just about me. It was about the tactics of the team. It was about how we could align the communication between the players on that tactical level, and those tactical principles around how Dario would have set up the team. We were playing 3-5-2 at Crewe, when 3-5-2 as a system wasn't even heard of. And I think he would have been one of the first. He would have been one of the first managers in any league over there to play 3-5-2 when we were playing it very successfully. And my first year, 88, I think it was 88, 89, when I signed for Crewe. We got promoted with Tranmere that year, and Tranmere were playing. Tranmere won the league. I think we came second or third, and we got promoted within that year. So that hook, I got hooked on the management and the coaching side of it more so. And I always captained the team at Crewe when I was playing. I think I made over 160, 70 odd appearances in 4 years at the club prior to moving to Preston. But the philosophy at the club at the time, in terms of the guided discovery approach that Dario would have used in relation to allowing players to make decisions on the pitch themselves. I took that with me to all the other clubs I went to, and then when I came back home from Preston to Ireland, I always felt it was a natural instinct that I was going to get into coaching and management straight after that.
Oh, that's a great way into it. An icon of the game in Dario Gradi. And you look at the players that Crewe produced, especially in the early 90s, early to mid 90s, the likes of Danny Murphy, Neil Lennon, Robbie Savage. David
Platt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, players that would go on to play in probably the biggest European games, I guess, wouldn't they? With international level and Champions League finals with the likes of David Platt and everything. And what an inspirational person to be around to learn your coaching badges from it. And it does have a big influence, doesn't it, when you're around those sorts of people. I had a similar experience myself with when I was at Cambridge United, starting off about 10, 12 years ago now, with the likes of John Beck. And I actually had John Beck. He had a really, really bad reputation in the late 80s, early 90s as being a teacup thrower. But he was the manager that got Cambridge United to the brink of the Premier League in '92. And funnily enough, it was Leicester City that knocked him out, who were the club I support. But then it would be Cambridge United that would be the club that gains a lot of my heart, because that's where I started my coaching career out of. But when you look at those sorts of people, they have a big impact on your life, don't they? Because of their experiences and what they share with you, and it is fantastic. And then of course you went from Preston back to Ireland, and
it's funny that you bring up the name John Beck, because one of the reasons I left Preston was because John Beck had come in.
Oh no. Was it the long ball?
So it was so funny. It was so funny the way it happened, because I'd signed a two-year contract, 2 years left on a 2.5-year contract when John Beck came in, and I think it was a poll. Sam Allardyce had taken over caretaker.
Yeah.
When Les Chapman had actually got sacked, and Sam Allardyce was the favourite for the job. I remember there was a phone-in vote on the radio, and most of the fans at the time wanted Sam to take over. But the club, in their wisdom or in their madness, I'd say, looking back, they decided to bring in John, and John came in, and came in for the last sort of 3 or 4 months of the season with a view to obviously building the club on a different footing. And when I've been so used to playing the game, passing through the birds, passing through midfield, playing balls into feet, playing balls, pass and move. We were brought up on the Crewe philosophy, and Joe Royle would have been the same. Get the ball down, pass and move it, keep it simple, let the ball do all the work, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, and like you said earlier, and what we said earlier in the podcast in relation to different managers of different approaches, and John came in, and at that time I was playing centre half or fullback, and all I was asked to do was, can you put that ball in behind the two fullbacks? That's all I want you to do, nothing else. I don't want you passing the ball into midfield. I don't want you passing the ball to fullbacks. I want you every time. And I remember having a chat with him at the time, thinking that I was the coach and the manager, having done the A license, etc., etc. I was saying, what if that ball's not on, John? What if I can't play that ball? Surely I have to be able to play to the fullback, or surely I can play it into the midfield player who can turn, and who's in the higher up the pitch, play a better ball than me. And it was his way or the highway.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I totally get that. And you know what? It's exactly the same, Owen, on my level 2 it was at the time. I think it was 2000. And he turned around. It's bizarre you say that, because he turned around and he says, "This is your top." I can't remember what it's like. I think it was like a passing topic or something, for example. And he'd say, "Right, this is how you're going to do it. I'm going to show you, and then you have to go in and do it. And then if you don't do the exact carbon copy of what he did, no. It's going to go back to the drawing board." And I think I went back to the Abbey Stadium that day, and I was so frustrated. And the lad said to me, "That Chris, who's your tutor?" I was John Beck. The lads burst into absolute hysterics, because obviously they knew exactly what he was like. And the fact that you've just said that now, it's amazing how he's taken that in for obviously his playing day.
I have to say, in John's, I have to say, in John's defence, he was actually a nice man. I mean, he did think about the game. He wanted, I think his philosophy came from Charles Hughes, the old director of the FAA, in relation to, if you get the ball into certain areas and you put it into the box, a la Graham Taylor, that the more times you get it, wide and into the box, the more chance you have of scoring. So there was, a little bit of objectivity in relation to what he's trying to do. Unfortunately, what happened was teams started to drop off. And play against them and hit them on the break and stuff like that. So, well, the problem we had, okay, can you play that ball? It wasn't a problem playing the ball in behind the fullbacks or the centre halves if you were on a pitch. But believe it or not, of course, when I went to Preston, I went on to another all-weather pitch. So that was the second all-weather pitch of my career. So to try and actually play a long ball when you're, trying to get underneath the ball on an all-weather pitch is very, very difficult. So, it was a unique time up at Preston, and I do remember, I don't know if you ever see any of the clips going back at the Preston team at the time, he actually had tracksuit bottoms specially made for all of us to wear, and they used to cover your knees so that you'd have padding on your knees, and you had padding either side of your shorts. And we had, as defenders, we had to wear these tracksuit bottoms in games. So, and the idea behind it was, it used to stop us getting most of the centre halves and most of the fullbacks, most of the players, anyone that used to tackle at that stage would have relentless burns from the pitch, particularly the slide tackles. And to be fair, the tracksuit bottoms did stop you getting a lot of the burns. And, when you did get some of those grass burns, particularly from those all-weather pitches, you were in pain for 3 or 4 days. You weren't sleeping for 3 or 4 days. So, they're great. They're a great tool, I suppose, for training, great for training environment and young kids, the all-weather pitches, but to actually play, competitive first-team games in the UK, the supporters, and, all the supporters up and jumping, this, that, and the other, just, doesn't make sense to me. I know there's a couple of non-league sides down below, in the lower leagues have them, and it's probably an income generator for most of them. But, to actually watch a competitive game on them is very dull, and having experienced it, I don't recommend it.
No, it's a bizarre. I think the first recollection I've got of someone wearing like tights, I think is probably a better word for a better word, was Lenny Glover in the 70s. I think I remember watching some old Leicester highlights, and there was a picture of Lenny Glover on the left wing for Leicester at Filbert Street, and he had a white, I think, with blue shirts, white shorts, white blue socks, and had these white stockings on, and I think. And the commentator over on the game was in disbelief. But I think he turned around and said, "Oh, he's borrowed a pair of his wife's stockings to keep his legs warm," or something like that.
Well, I think you see some of the foreign players come over now and they're wearing the gloves in the winter time. And to be fair, like if your hands are cold in the game, yourself, it's an external factor that's you're not concentrating on your next pass, your next press, your next movement with the team. Like, so and you can't get cold winters over there.
Oh, yeah.
The same, you get cold winters over here. So that was the only blessing in disguise where you didn't get obviously the burns, and in the winter time they were nice to wear, but it was very, some of the cold showers were true, by the way, with John, as you know.
Yeah.
In before the game, get a cold shower. So people used to ask me, was that true? Was it not true? It was true. And one of the things that we won't talk about that he used to do that was a little bit bizarre, but for him it was a little bit around team building, team bonding, and we Preston got off to a good start with him. But I think over time fans just got a little bit sort of used to the long ball. It works for so long, and something had to give. And I think he lasted about 2 seasons. I think David Moyes took over, if I'm not too wrong. And David Moyes was a Preston when I was there.
Wow, God. He was there for quite a long time, David Moyes, wasn't he? Did he? Start his youth team, man.
Myself and David Moyes, we played 3 centre halves in one of the games against Bradford away, and the 3 centre halves was David Moyes, myself, and Sam Allardyce. Sam was still playing player. He was managing the reserve team at the time, so it was 3 big lads at the back.
Yeah, that's not bad. That and how was Big Sam and David Moyes to play alongside? Because obviously they've gone on to carve out really successful careers, and obviously they're in the Premier League at the minute. Could you see that natural progression for them?
Yeah, the coaching course I'd done down in Lilleshall, David Moyes was on. I think he was down from Celtic at the time, one of the clubs in Scotland. I'm not too sure which one, and I got talking to him on that course. So I knew him when he came into Preston at the same time as I did. We known each other from the course that we just done. And Sam at the time was always tinkering with systems of play and talking to you about tactics and stuff like that. He was always going to be a coach and a manager. We knew that. I knew that at the club, and I think he was waiting for that chance at Preston. It didn't happen for him at the time. I think if I'm not 100% sure, not 100% sure of this, but I think after the reserve team job, he went over to do Limerick in Ireland.
Oh, right.
And I think Limerick in Ireland was his first club as a coach, and he done really well at the club. And then he went back to Notts County. From Notts County, then he built his career going on to Bolton, and what he done at Bolton was just incredible. And what he's done since has been incredible. And to be fair, he was a very good thinker. He thought outside the box. He was one of those guys that was thinking of the rest and recuperation that he did within the game. He was we call it periodization of football now. Yeah. And he was doing that. He was doing that when we didn't call it periodization. It was just called something else. So he was a big thinker, and still is to this day. And the fact that he's still working at that Premier League level just shows you how good he is and was.
Oh, 100%. And that's absolutely brilliant stories, is that as well. So with your own managerial career, Aaron, when you went back over to Ireland, of course, unfortunately, the League of Ireland, it's not full time, is it? So I mean, how did you adapt to then going and managing part time, and then having to have the transition to then of course find full time work? Did you feel like you had enough support from the FA and from the clubs that you were with at the time to make that transition into management, into part-time management?
Yeah, no, I think the one aspect I will say is the PFA in the UK were unbelievable to me. I'm still a member of the LMA now, and they're still very approachable, within any contractual situations you have. You just have to bring the LMA up. But the PFA at the time were rolling out a scheme where you could apply for funding in relation to doing some course. So the first thing I did when I got off the plane, I think it was 31, 32, coming back to Ireland. I just came back as a player. I wasn't coming back as a coach or manager at the time. Coming back as 32, 33, give or take. And the first thing I remember my wife saying to me at the time, look, what are you going to do now? Like, I mean, this is only part-time stuff. So I said, I'm going to go back to college. And it was something that, I'd left school at an early age, 15 and a half. So I'd missed a lot out in education. I didn't know at the time what specifically I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something in relation to sports. So I done a degree in sports management at one of the top colleges over here, University College Dublin, and I've done one or two other courses within, strength and conditioning and fitness and sport. There was a couple of modules, certificates in that as well, on top of the degree in sports management. So that degree was mostly funded by the PFA, and without the PFA's help, I probably wouldn't have been able to go on the course. And I have to thank them and the people within that union for that grant, and that set me on my way to start looking at working outside of football, albeit in a sporting context.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough at the time, when I was halfway through that course, that the local council over here in Dublin City Council, had advised for sport development officers across the city. It was a new initiative. They hadn't had any sport development officers anywhere in the country of Ireland. The UK had already started the sports development programme, albeit in very small areas. So they advertised them halfway through, and I went for the position, and I was fortunate enough to get one of them as well. So,
great.
And then within the council, I've had a couple of promotions since, up to now, as I say, managing 3 sports and leisure centres on behalf of the council, which is brilliant, because it keeps me involved in the sporting infrastructure. We rent out the halls and the gyms and the pitches to all the local communities, and it's a great way of getting out and talking to people, the local community, and a great way of meeting young kids and watching the development of young kids across the city. So I was lucky in one sense, but I did have to put the hours in. I was still playing, believe it or not. I was still playing 33, and at that time,
still young at 33.
Well, at 33, I was still playing. I was trying to think where I was. I was at Shelbourne or St. Pat's. I can't remember which club at the time.
Yeah.
And it was mad because I was coming home from midweek games, and I was getting stuck into the college bus after the games, which is like 10:30 at night time. And I had a couple of young kids. So I was on the late feed as well. So for about 3 or 4 or 5 years, it got a bit hectic around the household. But looking back now, it was the best thing I could have done, and it set me up for a good career, particularly outside of the game. Albeit I wouldn't mind being in a full-time capacity within the game, but we don't have the clubs over here. We don't have the clubs over here to go into a full-time capacity. And if you are one of the fortunate coaches to be on a full-time capacity, yourself, it's a very fickle industry. One minute you're a hero, the next minute you're sacked, and what do you do after that? So it's a difficult environment to be in. You can't put all your eggs in one basket, which is what I didn't do. And I gave myself choices, and those choices have held me in good stead, really.
No, definitely, and you're in a fine position now, Aaron, as well, aren't you? Like you said, like you touched upon then about being able to keep the community engagement going, and help to promote the game at grassroots level, I guess, isn't it? With you all through the council, and how in terms of with your role at the moment in the sports development, do you tend to focus more on specific sports? Of course, over in Ireland, there's a lot. Obviously, the biggest games over there, like the GAA and the rugby unions, obviously probably a lot bigger than football, isn't it? Really, in terms of when you look at like full-time clubs, that obviously you've got the likes of Ulster and Leinster and that, who are full-time rugby teams, and as we alluded to earlier, the football unfortunately is only part-time. So do you tend to focus a little bit more on trying to grow the game of football over in Ireland, or?
Yeah, I think what we do as a council, we have to focus on participation. Yeah. And then what we do is we let the national governing bodies of the sport focus on development and performance. So, but I believe there's a link between participation and then, if you start participating, you now have a chance to develop, and now you have a chance to go into high performance. So there is a pathway there, and the FEI and the GAA are very good clubs. Can you hear that fire alarm?
What's that, sorry?
Can you hear that fire alarm? No,
I can't hear a thing.
That's okay.
No, I can't hear a thing.
You sounded it out well. No, they're just doing a test on the alarm there, so I didn't know if you could hear it or not. I'll continue. So yeah, the national governing bodies are very active in terms of participation as well. They have a lot of summer camps and camps at Easter time and Christmas time to improve participation. Well, with a council perspective, we look at sport, and I think that's the way, we've got to look at it, and we've got to develop sport for the wider population, the wider community, whether you're young or whether you're old. And the facilities we provide for them, we allow access to these facilities at fairly reduced cost to the local community.
That's good.
And then if we see any really good young players within the system, what we do is we just we recommend them to the various national governments that we think that they can go and do a job.
That's really good. That's really good that you got that option as well. And I guess with you all as well, you get to work. You do a lot of collaborations with the community clubs, with the FAI, and you get to build really good relationships, I guess, with that as well, don't you? In terms of like because obviously you got the community engagement as one of the key factors in your role. But ultimately, I guess it's building the relationships as well with all these big organisations as well. And so, what's been your biggest motivation to keep you going? Because of course you had a fantastic playing career, you had a good career, good touch up on management as well. What's been your biggest motivation to keep keeping you in sport, Marin, over the years?
Well, I think the money sport has given me, as you say, those connections, to being able to to meet people at different level, to talk to different coaches, different managers, different. I love seeing young players develop. That's one thing I've always got enjoyment out of. And if I've played a part in that, and I've sold a couple of players when I was managing Bohemians to the UK, Charlton, and I've been, when I was managing UCD, we had, I'd say, about 20 players over about a 3-year period, where we got them, got moves into Premiership clubs over in Ireland, and 1 or 2 over to the UK, and even 1 or 2 caps at senior level. So I played a part along the way, and watching that development and seeing it, and seeing the enjoyment those players are getting, and put those pathways in place. It does give you a sense of, well, look, I've played a part in that.
Yeah,
fair play to him. Fair play to him. He's put his head down and he's done the work. But I've given that leg up. I've opened that door for them. And sometimes, people think that when the doors are shut from some managers, that their career is finished. I think sometimes when the door shuts, it's an opportunity for another door to open. Players, and I always used to see that as, if I had a disagreement with a manager, that was it. I used to just park it and then go on to the next project or the next club. So I think even today, I've just finished a gym session prior to coming on to having a chat with yourself, Chris, and that fitness thing, it's a lifelong fitness for me, where you keep that fitness levels as high as you can. And I suppose the mental health benefits. I read a lot about it. And I was watching a program just a couple of weeks ago on one of the TV podcasts, where Niall Quinn, who was a very good friend of mine and has been all the way through the years, from the UK and over here and playing for Ireland, and he said when he finished playing at Sunderland, that he went into a dark place. He sort of left football, nothing else to do. And I think the transition that I had was, I finished full-time football at about 32, and I came back into transitioning between part-time, and then all of a sudden I got a job. So I had something to fall back on. So if I wasn't offered a contract, I was still working. So I wasn't down income, which and we were buying houses and mortgages and bills to pay. So I think the transition I had was actually, suited me.
Yeah.
And it probably suits a lot of people, to go from being a professional and then suddenly do nothing. I can imagine how hard it is. And Noel, I think, communicated that on the program, that he was saying that he was in a dark place. He started, staying in a lot. He didn't go out. He didn't socialise. And, luckily that it was the help of his wife that got him up and out and about again, and meeting people again. And I can, I can see how that would happen with a lot of players, and it is happening. But, fortunately for us now, the LMA and the PFA over the UK, that those support networks are in place for players and managers who do lose their job to just to make that call. If it's a call that you need to do, to talk to a friend, to talk to someone about how you feel, and particularly I think talking is the key. Don't be afraid to talk about it. And as you say, those you just never know what that talk's going to do, or even if it's the case that they have to refer you to a service. And we've got services over here, voluntary services over here, that help people with mental health, and you have it over in the UK as well. So those services are the lifeblood of any community, and it's difficult. It is difficult when you're and a lot of players are going to in any sport, whether it's rugby union, rugby league, whether it's for the if you're finished playing the sport and you're doing nothing, it's a big shake up to the system.
Yeah, and it's about having a clear vision as to what you want to achieve in life, isn't it? And you've got to start early. And obviously, fortunately, you did that at Crewe, and you know, it seems to have served you really well, and obviously having the right network around and having the family with you as well is going to obviously pay dividends. I've really enjoyed it, Aaron, this morning. It's been absolutely, and to be honest, I could probably talk for 2, 3, 4 hours, and we could probably cover so many different elements and angles. But I just want to say a massive thank you for sharing your experiences with us, and it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you this morning. And for the guys that want to reach out and maybe connect with you, going forward, where's the best place to find you?
Well, you can, obviously get me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn like a lot of people now. Or, they can, if they want to send me an email and have a chat, aacallaghan@gmail.com, aacallaghan@gmail.com. They send me an email, and if I can give them a bit of advice in any way, whether from a player, from a coaching, from a management perspective, I can help out in any way, please, get in contact with me, and we'll get the numbers on the WhatsApp, and we can have a chat, or we can have a chat on Zoom like this, which is, I think that is, as you say yourself earlier on in the podcast, Chris, that the Zoom meetings have connected a lot more people and wouldn't have connected, in any way. Please give me a call or give me an email, and if I can help out, feel free to contact me anytime.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely brilliant. And Zoom is an absolute godsend at the moment. Keeps us sane, doesn't it? Keeps us sane and gives us something to look forward to in the day as well, doesn't it? Knowing that you can have a conversation.
Brilliant.
It's been absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed the chat, and I look forward to catching up soon. And have a great day, and I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Chris. Stay safe.
Thank you.